and welcome back to my channel where I'm revisiting some of my earlier class-related videos. Within this video, we will be finishing off the level advancement of our Barbarian Class character that we have been using in this miniseries. And this is where we will begin to run into some of the corrective measures we'll have to make when advancing our levels. But I'll be sure to point those out as we continue, so let's begin by continuing with level 11. At level 11, we are going to gain the Relentless Rage feature, and that's the only change that we're going to see outside of the normal number of hit point increases and things like that. I'm just going to commit this change and just confirm that Relentless Rage has been added as appropriately. And it has, and it looks like it's correct. Perfect. So let's go ahead and take a look at this feature in a little bit more detail. What this feature does relates to your rages and being able to get reduced to 0 hit points and still survive the hit. So essentially what that means is that while your character is raging, if your character is hit and reduced below 0 hit points, your character can make a Constitution saving throw with an initial DC 10 Constitution-based saving throw for this check. And if it's higher and you succeed on that particular check, your character will simply drop to 1 hit point as opposed to dropping to 0 hit points. However, this doesn't necessarily have a usage limitation, but the number of checks that come after the fact become a lot more difficult. So if your character is reduced to 0 hit points again for the second time, you can once again make use of this particular check. However, the value of that check has now increased by 5 points. That means it's no longer a DC 10 Constitution saving throw, it's now a DC 15 Constitution saving throw. Having said that, I'm now suspecting that we could probably make some optimizations to this particular feature before we consider this actually usable. Yes, we can, and that's mainly because this is being applied as an effect. But there's really no quote-unquote condition as to when this effect is being triggered, so it's really going to come into play whenever your character ends up making a Constitution saving throw. I'm also not convinced, and we can test this here, that this wording is going to work. So if I go ahead and take a look at the combat tracker here, we should still be in here. If I drag this effect onto our character, we're going to see the effect that's listed, but if our character is reduced to 0 hit points, it doesn't necessarily automatically imply that we're going to have to make a Constitution saving throw. And to help with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce our character so that they only have 1 hit point left. I'm then going to move the token over, and I'm going to, where's just a straight attack here? Here we go. I'm going to do some damage to our character. See what happens. Yeah, so there's no automatic Constitution saving throw that comes into play, and I didn't think there was. I just wanted to make sure that everyone else saw that on screen. All right. So I have come up with the first change that I wanted to do. First, I removed the old effect, and I did that just simply by right-clicking on this and selecting Remove Action. I then added a new action by right-clicking on the actual feature here and then adding an action, and then I added a cast type of action here. And what I've done is I've set it for a fixed check because there's no additional bonuses that are coming into play here. And it's going to be a Constitution-based saving throw. It's a fixed check, and I've set the base value to be 10. What that means is that we now have a Constitution DC 10 saving throw, which matches our first condition here. Theoretically, with all of the eventual bonuses, as well as magical equipment and whatnot, you could potentially be required to roll a DC 30 or even make a DC 30 or 35 saving throw. So that will be the next thing I will do is I'm going to copy or create new copies of this particular check here and build it out until we get DC 35. So I'll be right back. I am just adding the last one here and I want to show that on screen. All I'm doing is popping it open with this magnifying glass here, selecting the Constitution base type for its saving throw, changing this to fixed, and then adding in a hard fixed value here. Oops. In relation to the actual check. So now we have Constitution DC saving throw, and we have 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35 here. Now there's something that I'm going to point out about this. I'm going to once again set our character up to have only 1 hit point left. I'm then going to suffer damage associated with that hit. we're now being reduced to 0 hit points. And let's say that this is the first time that we've had to do this. All we have to do is make that roll. But here's the catch. If we don't add one more convenience change here, the Dungeon Master is going to have to make some adjustments. And that is the correction of our number of hit points, as well as the removal of these two particular effects. Well, what I want to do is automatically have that changed for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a heal action. All it's going to do is heal us by 1 hit point. Nothing more, and that's it. That's all we want. Now when I apply this onto our character, it's going to get rid of everything except the prone, which is technically correct because you're on the ground. And we're going to have that 1 hit point automatically healed. So the thing it does get rid of for us is the unconscious state, which is excellent. Now, whenever we pass our saving throw, we just simply apply the heal, and the Dungeon Master literally has to do nothing. I've made one minor adjustment to this. Instead of this targeting section being set to targets, I'm updating it to be self, and that's so that we can just simply click on this button in order to apply the effect and the heal to our character. Now, when our character suffers damage and is reduced once again to 0 hit points, we're going to see the unconscious effect return. All we have to do is roll our saving throw. In this case, it's the second tier of saving throw, which we succeeded. Then I simply click this, the unconscious effect goes away, and we regain 1 hit point. This is much more convenient than the Dungeon Master having to go back, remove the unconscious effect, add in 1 hit point onto our character. This way they don't have to do anything. They can just simply allow us to apply the heal, and away we go. The only thing this is not going to track is which DC we used last. So what I recommend you do is simply, whenever you execute a check, you set this to be the next check in the queue. So in this case, I say DC 15. So in our case, it would be 20 because I've already used 15. That way you know, oh, I got to execute DC 20 here in order to be able to make my next saving throw. Once you've quote-unquote received a rest, what you can then do is simply reduce this back to 10 and then begin the process again. So I'm going to go ahead and move our character up to level 12. And when we do this, we're going to gain our next ability score improvement. And I've already done a feature. I've already done a 2-point ability score improvement. So this time I'm going to do an individual 1-point increase on 2 stats. So I'm going to select this time. I'm going to go back to the stats page here. I've already got a good strength. I could use a little bit more dexterity, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. Now, if I don't do anything else, as you can see, we're going to have a 2-point increase. But I also want to bring my intelligence up 1 point in order to activate a bonus there. Once I do that, this returns to being a 1-point increase, and we gain 1 point here. There's nothing in our feats that we have to deal with, and all we have to do is commit that. The next thing that we also have to take into account is that the number of rages we have does in fact increase. So we need to make a modification to that in order to take that into account. Level 13 is going to be our next level. I'm going to go ahead and pop this open, and we will see that our brutal critical is going to come into play, but there's also some other changes that we're going to want to remember to deal with. One is specific to our proficiency bonus, and we're going to have to adjust this because of how this is going to come into play. Nothing else here changes though, so we can just go ahead and commit this. This is where things get a little weird. And of course, as soon as I say that, it looks like Smiteworks has managed to fix the problem. What was originally happening was that every time you gained an additional feature, if you will, that was simply an increment when it comes to dice increments, you would gain a second viewing of that skill or feature. In this particular case, it looks like we didn't have that happen. So there's only one instance of brutal critical here. We do, however, still need to make an adjustment to the total number of dice. That part doesn't change. I don't think there's a way for them to easily be able to pick up on that. So all we have to do in this case is actually make that minor adjustment specific to the total number of dice that you can now use. Now, before we continue, we do have a racial trait here that we have to adjust, and that is that the number of uses specific to Stone's endurance goes up by 1 point because we now have an increase in our proficiency bonus. So I'm going to minimize that. I'm going to set this to preparation, scroll down, and then change that 4 to a 5. And that's all we have to do for level 13. Level 14 is going to be extremely straightforward in this particular case because we are gaining a class specialization feature, not something that we have to deal with in this video. So I'm just going to go ahead and commit this change. And as we can see here, we're gaining a path feature. Nothing else is increasing when it comes to any of our other stats, so we don't have to make any further adjustments. Now, obviously, when you're looking at the class specialization videos, I'm going to have something there. In this particular case, we're looking at the base class and the base class only. That's the reason why I'm skipping whatever features being added there. At level 15, we are going to gain the persistent rage feature. So I'm going to go ahead and increase this. We will see that we now have our persistent rage feature. Nothing else changes here. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that. In this particular case, persistent rage nullifies the effect of not being hit, canceling out your rage. So if you go through an entire turn now without being hit, you get to maintain your rage. The only time you now lose rage is if you fall unconscious or you have chosen to end it. This is a nice improvement. It's sad that it takes to level 15 before you get that ability, but on the other hand, I understand why that's done because this is actually quite a powerful change. However, this isn't going to add any new effect or actionable effect here to your character because all it's doing is giving you directions on now how to deal with rage if you're not hit over a given turn. That's literally it. At level 16, we are going to gain our next ability score improvement. And in this case, I'm once again just simply going to choose to increase an ability score, and I'm going to give our dexterity a bonus increase here. However, we do still have to make one minor adjustment, and that's because our damage that we deal with when it comes to rage has increased by 1 point. So we need to make sure that we pop open our rage effect here and make that adjustment because Fantasy Grounds is not going to do that for us. Once that's done, our rage effect is ready for use. What you'll want to do is ensure that you pop open the combat tracker. Simply go ahead and remove rage if you happen to have it there already, and then reapply it if your character rages. That way, the next time your character rages, you will see the changes associated with rage. When it comes to unarmored defense, which is going to gain or giving our character a bonus to the armor class that our character is receiving, we don't have to make any adjustment there because our character's armor class is automatically taking that into account for us. So when we increased the level here and we increased our dexterity, this also increased as a result. If you look at previous portions of this video, if you will see that this was an AC 14. Level 17 is going to once again see an increase in the number of dice we can use for brutal critical. And we can see that here. However, as before, we will have to make the modifications to brutal critical ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and make an adjustment to now be 3d8 as opposed to 2d8. Beyond that, we also have an increase in the number of rages that we can use, and our proficiency bonus makes its final increase. So let's go ahead and increase the number of uses for rage to be 6. And because our proficiency bonus is increased, we also need to change Stone's endurance here to also be 6. At level 18, we will be gaining Indomitable Might. So I'm going to go ahead and increase our character's level here. Nothing else changes. I'm going to commit this. And I do not believe that would automatically add to our character. So let's just pop this open for a second, and then we'll take a look at it. So what Indomitable Might gives us is that if we happen to make a strength check and we roll a value that is lower than what our strength stat actually is, we get to use our strength stat as the value of that roll, meaning that we can never ever have a roll lower than 20 at this particular point in our character's career. Now, when it comes to things where you're rolling against a particular effect on a check or when you're doing an actual check, all you now have to do is tell the Dungeon Master, hey, does the value exceed 20? Then I'll roll. If it doesn't, then it's automatically a pass because my minimum value is a 20. Although at this point in your character's career, there's probably still a few chances where you're going to be making a check roll or a saving throw because of that. This only applies, by the way, to your strength check. It does not apply to a saving throw. So the only time this will work is related to a DC check, specific to a skill check, not specific to a saving throw. At level 19, our character is going to gain their last ability score improvement. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that open. Select that. Now I could have chosen stats for all of these, features for all of these, but to speed this video along, I'm simply choosing stat increases. And I'm going to go ahead and increase our dexterity one more time. There we go. Okay, we now have a DC +3. I'm not sure if that was +2 prior, but I'm pretty certain it was. Yes, it was, because we now have an AC of 16. So I just wanted to make sure that you could see that that increase was going to happen here. But when it comes to level 19, there's nothing else our character is going to gain from this particular change. And that's because any weapon that we have that might be able to use our dexterity, as long as we have that set to use dexterity, will have automatically updated on its values here, associated with either the damage or associated with the actual bonus to our hit, if you will. In this particular case, we're relying on strength because strength is our better stat, so we don't have to worry about that. And none of these other features make use of that dexterity change, so we're good. And finally, the final level that our character is going to gain is obviously level 20 with the default rules of 5th edition. You don't really gain levels, you gain other things, but you don't necessarily gain more levels. We are going to gain our final feature called Primal Champion, and I suspect that's going to cause us to have to do a couple of things. I'm going to pop this open. Set that there, and then I'm going to see. Unfortunately, when we gain Primal Champion, yes, we're gaining a +4 to our strength and our constitution score, so they're going to increase by 4 each. It actually doesn't change here. So what we have to do is manually make that adjustment. And when we do that, this might actually trigger the requirement for us to go through and actually add in approximately 20 additional hit points here because we have had a +1 increase in relation to our constitution score. Actually, that went up by 2 points if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it went up by 2 points. So that means that we have to add 40 hit points to our character here. As you notice that this doesn't change. So that's 245, not 205. And that's because whenever you make an adjustment to your constitution, if that adjustment increases your constitution modifier here, or modifier rather, you gain all of those missing hit points. So if you're level 10 and you make an adjustment to your constitution score that bounces a +2 to a +3, you will gain 10 additional hit points at your character. In this case, because we bounced it to the point where we get a +2 bonus, we need to make sure that we multiply 2 times our level and add that to our total number of hit points. Beyond that, nothing else changes except we do gain our constitution modifier now being added to our armor class as well because of the unarmored defense skill and because our constitution is being applied because of that. The only other change that we're going to have to make is that the number of rages that we can now do is essentially unlimited. This means we can remove the daily limitation and just simply fire it at will. And with our character's change to how rage works at level 15 with the gaining of persistent rage, that means that the only time that our character can actually now lose rage is if they are knocked unconscious or we choose to actually drop the rage effect. However, that does conclude the level advancement process for the Barbarian class. I'm now going to go ahead and redo the Path of the Totem Warrior and the Path of the Berserker class specializations to bring them in line with the actual format we're using now for all of our videos. In the meantime, I hope you found this video useful and informative, that you liked it, and if you did so, please click that like button. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because as you can see, I release videos fairly regularly, well, minus the little COVID blip that I had, but that's to be expected, to be honest. However, feel free to comment on this video as well in the description below, because all of those things come into play when trying to expose this particular channel to other viewers who might be interested in the same topic.